Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The forest had long been silent, its ancient trees standing like stone sentinels, their twisted branches reaching toward a sky that barely remembered the sun. Erin's footsteps crunched softly over the carpet of dead leaves, the only sound that disturbed the eerie stillness. She had been traveling for days, following rumors that had led her deeper and deeper into the wilderness, rumors of a power that could change her fate. Her hand rested on the hilt of her worn longsword, a weapon that had served her well through countless battles. But today she was not seeking another fight. Today she sought something far more dangerous. The ruins came into view suddenly, the jagged remains of a forgotten civilization hidden beneath thick vines and moss. The stone structures were half collapsed, swallowed by time and nature, but their eerie presence still lingered. Erin Sellard quickened. This was the place. She stepped cautiously into the crumbling courtyard, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of life. There were none, only the faint rustle of the wind through the trees. The air felt heavier here, thick with a presence she couldn't quite place. Erin swallowed hard, her body tensing with unease, but she pressed forward. In the center of the ruins, partially hidden beneath a fallen pillar, was what she had come for, a sword. It was embedded in a stone pedestal, the hilt rising from the ground like the last surviving branch of a long, dead tree. The blade was covered in ancient runes, faintly glowing, as though the sword had been waiting for someone, waiting for her. Erin approached slowly, her heart pounding. She had heard stories of such swords, weapons of unimaginable power, cursed by dark magic and whispered about in legend. Most people would have turned back, but Erin had nothing left to lose. Her fingers brushed the hilt, and a voice filled her mind. "Take me." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was soft, seductive, and somehow familiar. It wasn't like anything she had heard before, not an audible sound, but a whisper that echoed within her thoughts, weaving through her consciousness. "Take me, and I will give you what you seek." Erin hesitated. Every instinct screamed for her to pull away, to leave the sword where it lay. But something inside her stirred, something dark, very deep within. She had lived too long in the shadows of her own pain, her own failures. The weight of her past had crushed her, twisted her into someone she barely recognized. If this sword could help her, if it could give her the power to right the wrongs she had suffered, could she really afford to turn away? Her hand tightened around the hilt, and with a single pull, the sword came free from the stone. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind, wrapping around her thoughts like a vine. She felt the power thrumming through the blade into her arm, through her chest. It was intoxicating. "Yes," the voice whispered. "You and I are one now together. We will be unstoppable." For a moment, Erin stood there, breathing heavily, the sword gleaming in the dim light of the forest. She had always been strong, but this was something different. She felt invincible, as if the very air around her had shifted, bending to her will. She could do anything, be anything, and yet in the back of her mind, a small voice, her own voice, whispered a warning. But she silenced it. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. The forest seemed darker as Erin made her way back through the trees, the sword strapped to her side. The whispers had quieted, but she could still feel the presence of the blade lurking just beneath her consciousness. It was strange, both comforting and unsettling at the same time. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the path ahead, but the feeling lingered. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the forest floor, Erin found a clearing and set up camp. She lit a small fire, the crackling flames offering some warmth against the cold night air. For a while, she sat in silence, staring into the fire, her thoughts drifting. The sword had promised her power to change her fate, to find justice for the wrongs that had been done to her. But at what cost? She had heard stories of weapons like this forged in dark magic, cursed to corrupt those who wielded them. But those were just stories, weren't they? "You doubt me." The voice was back, soft and alluring. Erin tensed. "I don't know what you are," she muttered under her breath, though she wasn't sure who or what she was talking to. "I am your answer," the voice said smoothly. "Your salvation with me, you can achieve what you've always wanted." "And what is that?" Erin's voice was sharp, her frustration seeping through. She had spent years searching for answers, for some way to fill the emptiness inside her. Nothing had worked. Nothing had brought her peace. Revenge, the sword whispered, and Erin's breath caught in her throat. You seek revenge for what was taken from you. I can help you with that. Erin clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. The memories flooded back her village, burning to the ground. The screams of her family, her friends, the faces of the marauders, laughing as they destroyed everything she had ever known. She had been powerless, then forced to flee, to hide. She had sworn she would make them pay. But years had passed, and the weight of that promise had only grown heavier. Why should I trust you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you have no other choice, the voice replied as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Without me, you are nothing, but with me, you can become unstoppable. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Erin's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. The sword, sex notes, echoed through her, stirring something deep inside, a hunger, a desire she had tried to suppress for so long. Could it be true? Could this sword really give her the power to take back what was rightfully hers? She stood abruptly, pacing around the fire. The night was cold, and the sky was filled with stars, but she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed by the sword, side promise, the intoxicating allure of power. Embrace it, the voice urged. Let me guide you together. We will destroy those who wronged you. Erin stopped pacing, her hand instinctively moving to the hilt of the sword. She could feel its power pulsing beneath her fingers, waiting for her to give in, to surrender. She squeezed her eyes shut, her mind a storm of emotions. She had spent so long fighting, resisting the darkness within her. But what if the darkness was the only way to find peace? What if this sword, this cursed, whispering blade, was the key to everything she had ever wanted? Erin's grip tightened on the hilt, and she drew the sword from its sheath. She raised the blade, the firelight reflecting off its gleaming surface. Yes, the voice whispered, almost breathless with anticipation. Yes, give in. Let me show you what you are truly capable of. For a moment, Erin stood there, the sword raised, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the power coursing through her, the weight of the sword heavy in her hands. She was on the edge, teetering between control and chaos. And then with a sudden violent movement, she plunged the sword into the ground. The whispers stopped. The forest was silent once more. Erin stood there, breathing heavily, her hand still gripping the hilt. The sword was buried in the earth, its power muted, for now. She could feel the pull of it, the temptation still lingering, but she had made her choice. For now, she would resist. Erin sat back on her heels, staring at the blade, now half buried in the soil, its whispers silenced for the moment. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing but not entirely dissipating. The sword, heart demon, lay dormant now, but she knew it wouldn't be quiet for long. It would wait, patient and insidious, until the moment her defenses wavered, ready to slip back into her mind and wrap itself around her thought. She lay down beside the fire, her eyes wide open, staring at the stars scattered across the blackened sky. Sleep came, but it was uneasy, fractured by fleeting dreams. In one dream, she saw her village as it had been, untouched by war, filled with laughter and light. Her mother smiled at her from the doorway of their house, her father standing nearby with his arms crossed, proud and strong. It felt real, so real that Erin reached out to touch them. But as her fingers brushed her mother's same hand, the scene shattered like glass. The sky turning red with fire. Screams filled the air, her parents' faces twisted in pain, and Erin was suddenly standing amidst ruins, the same ruins she had just left behind. She heard the voice, again, soft and familiar. This is what you fear, isn't it? It's whispered, losing them, losing everything. She jerked awake, her hand instinctively reaching for the sword, still. The embers of the fire glowed faintly, casting long shadows around the clearing. She was alone, but the presence of the sword felt as real as ever. She could still hear it, faint and distant, whispering promises in the back of her mind. Erin pulled herself to her feet, restless and frustrated she couldn't stay here. Not with that thing so close, not with its voice, slowly chipping away at her willpower. She sheathed the sword again, feeling its weight settle against her side, and began walking. The sun had barely risen when she reached the edge of the forest, the trees thinning to reveal rolling hills beyond. Somewhere in the distance, she could see the outline of a small village, a speck of civilization in an otherwise desolate landscape. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe there she could find answers. or at least escape the constant presence of the sword for a while. She kept moving, her thoughts spinning in endless circles. Every time she tried to focus, the whispers slipped back into her mind, reminding her of everything she had lost. She wanted to believe she could resist the sword as influence, but the longer she carried it, the harder it became to separate her own thoughts from its insidious promises. By the time she reached the village, her mind was clouded with fatigue. The village was small, no more than a few dozen houses clustered around a central square. People moved about, tending to their daily tasks, but none paid her any attention as she walked toward the nearest building, a small tavern with a faded sign creaking in the wind. Outside, the smell of stale ale and smoke filled the air. Erin approached the bar, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. A few men sat in the corner nursing drinks, but otherwise the place was empty. The barkeep, a grizzled man with a thick beard, looked up as she approached. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Erin nodded, her hand resting unconsciously on the hilt of her sword. "I am looking for someone. An old hermit lives in the mountains not far from here." The barkeep raised an eyebrow. "Kanzalan, you mean AI? He lives up there, but good luck finding him. He's not the kind to welcome visitors." "I'll take my chances," Erin said, her voice firm. The barkeep shrugged. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you. He's not exactly friendly." Erin nodded her thanks and turned to leave. As she stepped outside, the wind picked up, cold and biting. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist. Talon was her best chance. If anyone knew how to rid her of this cursed sword, it would be him. The journey to the mountains was long and arduous, the path winding steeply upward, becoming more treacherous with each step. The whispers had grown louder again, more insistent, as though the sword sensed her desire to be rid of it. "He can help you," the voice murmured, its tone soft and persuasive. "No one can. You and I are bound now. Why fight it?" Erin gritted her teeth, refusing to respond. She wouldn't be given, not yet. But the sword, Esther whispers, were relentless, picking away at her resolve with every passing hour. It was nearly dusk by the time she reached the hermit, at a small ramshackle building, nestled against the mountainside. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the faint glow of a fire flickered through the window. Erin approached cautiously, her hand still resting on the sword, Sass hilt. Before she could knock, the door creaked open, revealing a figure in the doorway. The man was tall and thin, his face weathered and lined with age. His eyes, though, were sharp and piercing, as if they could see straight through her. "You have come far," Callan said, his voice low and measured. "You've brought something dangerous with you." Erin met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. "I need your help," she said simply. Canalian stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The inside of the hut was sparse, with little more than a bed, a table, and a few shelves filled with strange objects, crystals, herbs, and scrolls that looked as old as the mountains themselves. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, sharp and earthy. "You carry the heart demon," Canalian said, not bothering with pleasantries, "a cursed blade forged in darkness." Erin unsheathed the sword, holding it out in front of her. "Can you help me?" she asked, her voice tight with desperation. Canalian studied the sword for a long moment before shaking his head. "No one can help you. Not as long as you continue to carry that thing. It feeds on your darkness, your anger, your pain. The more you wield it, the more it will consume you." "I don't tear that," Erin said, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't ask for this." "You didn't need to," Camptalan replied. "The sword found you because it knew you were vulnerable. It preyed on your weakness." Erin clenched her fists, her anger flaring. "Then what am I supposed to do? Just give up? Let it destroy me?" Canalian's gaze softened slightly. "There is one way," he said, his voice low, "but it's not easy. You must confront the darkness within yourself. Only then can you hope to break free of the sword influence." "And how do I do that?" Erin asked, her frustration mounting. Canalian sighed, turning away to stoke the fire. "That is something only you can answer. But be warned, the sword will fight you every step of the way. It will try to break you, to make you believe that you need it. But if you give in, it will destroy you." Erin stared at the sword, her mind racing. She had been fighting for so long, fighting against the pain, the anger, the guilt. And now, with this cursed blade in her hand, it felt as though she was losing the battle. "I shall do it," she said quietly, more to herself than to Canalian. "I'll face it." The hermit nodded, his expression grave. "Then may the gods help you. You'll need all the strength you can muster." As Erin left the hut and began her descent down the mountain, The whispers in her mind grew louder, more insistent. But this time, she didn't run from them. She let them come, let them swirl around her thoughts like a storm, because she knew that the only way to defeat the darkness was to face it head on. And for the first time in years, she was ready to fight.